The next thing is I create an instance of error codes, which allows me to get this is where I'm going to store the errors that license vault returns. License vault returns a series of errors on key validation to tell us whether it's key validation or whether we're retrieving any value, basically to tell us what type of error occurred on the server side. So it returns that error in an enumerated value, which you can look up error codes, and it comes with a series of values that you can use to process your returns differently. So the first thing I do is grab the delimiter, and so this is how I'm going to make it so that instead of having to hard code the delimiter into my code, I'm just going to pull it from the server, from License Vault. And if I enter 4 on the service side, the client will know that it's, the delimiter should occur at every four characters. So that's an example of how to use the delimiter. The next thing you see is I'm going to go ahead and show up any errors that came back from that delimiter. I want to know that License Vault is working correctly. Well, after you go ahead and configure the main startup for the system, you're going to try to apply functions to functionality to the buttons, and that's what the following code is about. When the text changes, you want to be able to set the delimiter and apply the delimiter to the text that's entered, and you can take a look at how that works. The install license key, this is the one that gets activated when we're going to run validation, and you want to basically uninstall the key from the system. And so this allows you to move the software, move the client to another system. So you want to take a look at this example, the key being this devalidate function here, this being the key item you need to examine. And you provided the product's GUID, the key you're trying to devalidate, and whatever value it is that you used for your machine ID when you originally validated. And again, error codes are returned. The next function you want to look at, this view license one, which basically what it does, it lets you go through the licenses stored in the license store object, and the license store object is using encryption to store your licenses therein. So you want to use the license store property called licenses to be able to unencrypt each license and return it in a way that you can loop through them. And this is all done without having to connect through the client to the License Vault service. So after you validated, these licenses are stored within the license store, and you can use them within your application without having to connect to the service. So this is a pretty quickly performing loop. The next one to look at is the validate function. This one is going to will validate your key and return a license. So the first thing we do is we create a license, set it to null, and then we create our error code variable, and then we call the validate function of the client, passing in the product GUID and the key, which is in the text field, and then we provided the machine ID that's going to be used for locking that key to the system. In this case, we're using this variable, the CPU ID, and then finally the error code passed in as an out variable, out parameter. Then after we're done with that, we check the error codes, and we want to make sure that if the error code is not equal to no errors, that means that there is an error, and we want to know what that error is. So it's going to show it up on the screen. And then finally, we test to see if the license already exists in the license store. and if it doesn't exist, we add it again. This makes sure that you don't end up with two licenses of the same for the same product um, inside, and so it wouldn't make sense to in this test program to do that. You may decide that that's fine, and so this is an example of how you would prevent a license from ending up twice in the system. But you can decide whether you want to allow that or not. The next thing is you have the ability to see these values that we were talking about in the second video, where we explain how you could store information about a product. We said that you could take a look at the copyright information and other product information. So these functions right here, they allow you to see that. So these three from here down basically grab information from the license store, or and so since you have returned the license from during the validation process, and you've stored it in a license store object, you can then use the license store object to grab the product to grab the product GUID. So that's what this example is showing, and it's also calling the license vault clients get product info, get copyright, and get product license methods. So these are processed through to the service, and the service returns the values you entered there. And then the last one we want to show you is this one, the validate all products function. This one, what's special about this one is that it allows you to validate without providing it the GUID. So if you wanted a single product to have many features within, then instead of passing in the product's GUID, you would simply pass in the key, and then you would get the product GUID back during the validation process. So this way you could enable and disable features in your software by calling this function rather than the other validate function, which requires a product GUID. So you have two options for validation. Well, let's go ahead now and take a look at and actually trying to use this. So I'm going to set this as startup project, and let's go ahead and run this test. We'll build it first to make sure it builds all right. Okay, it says that it succeeded, so let's go ahead and start it. Alright, it's telling me that a license validation is required. So we haven't installed any licenses, and we haven't given it anything. So it's basically telling us that there is nothing in there at this time. If we hit this button that says view license, you'll see there is no license. So let's go ahead and go into License Vault. We'll take the license that we created in video number 3 in this series, and we'll go ahead and bring it in and use it for this example. Oh, I must have typed something wrong. Okay,